we can commence with the call to order and the roll call through the liaison office.
Yes. So I'm just going to present myself real quick. I'm Tina Martinez. I'm the Community Development Director. Mr. Edgar Campos, he is the nonprofit coordinator, and he will be calling roll to this evening. Edgar?
Maria de Olivares. Mr. Raúl Reyes.
Here.
Mr. John Beckelheimer.
Right here.
Dr. Gaskins.
Here, present.
Mr. Robert Davis.
Present.
Daniela Sada Paz. Ms. Jacqueline Hinojosa. Mr. Juan Vargas. We do have quorum.
Mr. Chairman, you have quorum. You can commence the meeting. Would you like us to place the agenda on the screen?
Yes, I believe the next order of business is the minutes from the previous meeting. If they can just be read into the record. I know I received them via email. I don't know if all the other committee members also received them and were able to review them. But I personally had no issues with the minutes. If I could entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay, that was Mr. Reyes, correct? Motion?
That's
Correct. Is there a second?
I second. This is Gaskins.
Mr. Gaskins seconds.
And these were two meetings. These were 2 minutes for the two meetings. Just to clarify, it's for August 7th and August 10th. That's correct. Okay. All in favor?
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed signify by saying nay. All right, then we will. Is it? I believe we have 1 more minute. Unless there are any citizen comments, we have 1 more minute to the 5:45 deadline.
At the moment,
that's the next item on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, at the moment, we don't have any citizen comments. We are 1 minute away from the closing.
Well, sparing that we don't have any last minute comments, we can move on to the next agenda item. I guess number 5, I think.
Correct. The item number 5, if you'd like me to read it out, is just introduction of committee members and election of a chair and vice chair. Every year we do like to have quorum and for the first meeting of the application process for third-party funding, which is one of the major tasks of the committee to review these applications. We like to have a election of a chair and a vice chair. It could be the same slate that we have or a new slate. But I do want to just let the chairman, Mr. Diaz right now, some remarks if you want to introduce some of the committee members. And I don't know if they would want to say a few words or have any questions.
No, I know we have a couple of new members on the board, Ms. Hinojosa, Mr. Beckelheimer, and then I also saw that there's a Ms. Angie Diaz also on, who is not here with us right now, but if they'd like to say some words to introduce themselves, I can give them the floor. Ms. Hinojosa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Not really, but okay. So I work at the Laredo Area Community Foundation, and I've been working there since 2016. And before that, I worked at TAMIU for 15 years. So I've been working with grants the last 20 years.
Mr. Beckelheimer, if you...
Sure. John Beckelheimer, almost a lifetime resident of Laredo, born and raised here. I did live in San Antonio for about 8 years. Recently moved back. I'm in the oil and gas business, also an investor, and dabble in some real estate. Mr. Mercurio Martinez, Councilman for District 3, asked me to serve on this committee. I'm happy to help out. I'll be leaning on you that have some experience to get me up to speed. I understand the process. I'm just not sure about the dates of some of these things, but I'm happy to help out wherever I can, and thanks for welcoming me.
Thank you, Mr. Beckelheimer. Dr. Gaskins, I don't know if you'd like to give a brief introduction.
Yes, my name's Brian Gaskins. I used to work at TAMU for 18 years. I still live in Laredo, but I also travel back and forth to Houston. I used to teach and also was the person who was in charge of the technology at TAMU. And I represent Councilman Torres.
Thank you, Dr. Gaskins. Mr. Reyes, if you're there, would like to give a brief introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, my name is Raul Reyes. I currently serve as the county treasurer. I'm involved in many committees, nonprofit organizations. This is my third year, I believe, representing Councilman Vidal Rodriguez.
Thank you, Raul. Again, my name is Robert Days. I'm currently the chair of the third-party funding committee. I'm also involved in a lot of boards here locally in Laredo. If you have not already, I suggest that we turn in our conflict of interest disclosure forms, because I know I serve on some boards that do eventually apply for third-party funding. So just so everybody else is also aware that they have to file that paperwork. If they are on a board, if they're active on a board. If they're a volunteer, I don't believe that's necessary. But if you're a decision maker on a board, on a nonprofit board, then you do have to disclose that. I guess we can move on to the next item of business, which would be either reaffirming myself and Dr. Gaskins as the chair and co-chair. I'd like to open up the floor for nominations.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we continue with you as chairman and Dr. Gaskins as vice chair.
Thank you, Raul. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Beckelheimer. It's been moved and seconded that we continue on with myself as chairman and Dr. Gaskins as vice chairman. If there's any discussion, if there's no discussion, we'll go ahead and move forward to voting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any others opposed signify by saying nay. If there's no opposed, I believe the ayes have it. What would be the next item on the agenda?
Chairman, can I recommend that we open both items 6, which is staff report of timeline for this year's 2021 and 2022 third-party funding application, and I have a short presentation which I would want to put it together with item number 7, which is the presentation of some of the information. So just so I can give you some some general information and some of the timeline of what we're seeing of placing out the RFP and how all the conflict of interest might come to light, because I know some of the new some of the new members might not know, or we might not know which applicants actually we have a conflict with, because the applications, of course, have not come through. But last year's applications, they've already, been voted on, so there's no conflict there because they've already been funded, and staff is the ones responsible to reimburse and all that. But the actual conflict might come from any new applicants that come in. So
go ahead.
You allow me to proceed? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
So let me see. So what we're looking at right now is for this year's, and sorry, but it should say 2020, sorry, for fiscal year 2021, 2022 application process, because we are, this will be the process for funding that will be presented to, with the help of the committee, will be presented to our budget sometime in August to our city council, August of this year, to be enacted for October 2021. So just to give you a brief, a timeline that we've put together here in staff is we're hoping to set up the first notice to the public in the Laredo Morning Times. First publication would be on a Sunday. The most circulated newspaper would be March 21st. Then a second notice, March 28th. We would have a short application training for all applicants that are, and we usually consider this a mandatory training that they will have to attend so that we can make sure that they understand all the requirements that are going to be asked of them to turn in as part of their application. That would be March 31st. And then we'll follow up with the actual application deadline of April 19th. Application review. Then from there, it'll be charged, the committee will be charged to review. Staff will review for completeness, then we'll present it to the committee for the committee to score and evaluate and determine allowances based on the budget that we'll present that city has given me for both applications, which are general fund application and possibly the hotel motel application. So we'll have budgets for you at that time, or we'll have parameters for budgets, and we'll tell you which, how much funding we can, and we'll present you information on how much funding applicants get right now and what they're asking for and what the city could afford. So just as part of what is going to be required of everyone is going to be to review these applications, and to consider an application, they should have a score of a 70 or higher. They will be, the criteria for that would be historical narrative, a needs assessment, the service and programs they're providing, goals, objectives, and measures, budget, and their partnerships. Those are all the scoring criteria that will have different weights from 20 to 15 points. So at the end, we are very strict with these applications. We do advise everyone that they should be submitted at a timely manner. We won't, we usually don't allow for late, applications, just because we want to stick to our timeline and provide the committee the best, the most time for you all to review them. This year, we will be using, Edgar, if you can go to the next slide. Who's doing the slide? There you go. So the next, the item that we will discuss is we will provide the committee, so we will be using the city's e-bid system, which is the similar process that we used last year. We do remember there was some headaches with it, but we are working with purchasing to iron those out. So we did hear you out, and of course you all can, after, right now, after this presentation, you all can let me know what other things you all want us to consider, but we will make sure that it's a little bit easier to access both on the application side and both on the evaluator side. So we will take those into account. We will be providing a quick tutorial both for the applicant and of course for the committees. And right now we'll discuss what that timeline will look like, but we would like to provide you a training on how well to use it. Last year we used the system, but we also ran into a lot of other I would say obstacles because of the climate that we had in front of us. So I know it was very, it was a little bit more challenging last year, but I believe this year will be a lot smoother. We're starting at the right time. We have enough wiggle room to make, the application process, the evaluation process by you all, the committee, as long or as short as you all will need. I know last year we were kind of crunching numbers and having to do meetings twice in a week, and I know that's very tasking for everyone. So I have two different options right now that we'll discuss. But of course, next one. Okay, just to give you an overview, and we'll go more into detail once we provide you all a little bit more of the training on the actual application, but just an overview. This is what we share with the applicants as well as the committee. All the applications have to address a social problem. They have to promote community development. They have to raise some sort of standard of living. And then the sources of funding are both general fund and hotel motel revenue. Next one. And I know this seems like a crash course. We'll share this presentation with you all, and you all can always reach out to me or to Edgar Campos from our office. Nada de Leon is also with me, and I'm sorry I did not introduce her earlier. She is our compliance officer, so she helps with a lot of the compliance on the reporting side. So just some little considerations when we talk about general fund applications. They have to be 501c3s, nonprofits. They must be meeting a municipal purpose, and they must meet one of the three requirements. So they're either supporting education, promoting economic development, and promoting health and welfare. So last year, just to give you a little history of the way the committee recommended funding based on applications, based on need. And then council also, we took those recommendations to our city council, and city council had to prioritize even stricter due to the climate that we were in, and due to some restraints that they had also in funding. So we ended up even funding a little bit less. I think that's the first time that it's actually ever happened. We gave priority to some food and some more, immediate needs that the community had, just to give you a little bit of the background on that. Next slide, please. So for consideration of funding for hotel motel, they have to be a 501c3. Every expenditure must directly enhance and promote tourism and convention and hotel industry. And a term that we always use, or you might hear from different organizations that request hotel motel, they need to show heads to beds. They need to show that they've actually created some hotel stays. And then this is by state law. They must meet one of these 9 requirements and are also to be considered for funding. Improvement, maintenance of a convention center, visitors information center. 2, convention registration. 3, advertising and promotion. 4, promotion of the arts. 5, historical restoration or preservation. 6, sporting events, only certain municipalities. 7, enhancements of sports facilities, only in certain municipalities. 8, tourism, transportation systems, and 9, signage promoting sites and attractions. Next slide. So just to give you some of the, additional information. So ultimately, the contracts are awarded by council, by city council. So based on your recommendations, council can increase, decrease, or even, nix a contract or not. But awarding of contracts will happen around September to October. We'll be advising all nonprofits to let us know if there's any change in their board, any change in their executive director positions, just to make sure. We'll remind them that their contracts are only October 1st, 2021 to September 30th, 2022. And then we just talk to them about contract requirements in general. So these are some of the requirements that we're going to be expecting of them once we enter into a contract with some of these agencies. That's it, what I have from the presentation side. What I want to show you next is, or unless anybody has any questions, does anybody have any questions so far? What I wanted to show you next was what we were looking as part of the committee timeline. Let me see, Edgar, can you stop sharing that one? Okay, perfect. So the way I mentioned, so on that presentation that I just showed you is what the timeline for the applicants will be. From that timeline, what I would like for the committee to vote on right now or consider is letting me know this is a proposed timeline that I would want to use to evaluate the applications coming in. But from here, you all can let me know if this seems something, something y'all want to consider. I know, like I mentioned last year, we were kind of on a fast track and we, added meetings twice a week and stuff like that. I proposed two different timelines, one giving us 2 weeks from each and one giving us 1 week from each evaluation. What we've seen in the past that works well is after the date of application gets, the city will take about a week to review all the applications for completeness. So usually if I'm telling all the nonprofits that they have a date of March 22nd to turn in, April, right? Edgar, sorry, yeah. April 19 would be their deadline, right? Okay, so April 19 will be their deadline to turn in. So I'm giving staff about a week and a few days to review the applications for completeness so that first meeting that they bring you a list of all the applicants so y'all can see, one, do y'all have any conflicts? You could at that time determine to fill out all the non-disclosure recusals and conflict of interest forms that you would have to submit. And two is you would be able to see at that point, we would give you a little training on what is going to be expected of the evaluation period and how to use the EBIT system to evaluate these applications. And of course, answer any other questions. Sometimes, for the most part, there'll always be a few applications that are missing a few, a signature line here or a little item. It's up to the committee if they accept it as complete or not. So those are things that we'll bring up to the committee and y'all get to decide. What I'm suggesting here at the first meeting be April 28th. In both of the timelines, I'm suggesting the same date, but we can always, I would like to stick to that week, but you all can change if you all prefer a Wednesday or a Thursday. The 28th would actually be a Wednesday. And the only reason that I'm asking for this one to possibly be considered at a noon meeting would be because I would be asking other city staff, which is from our purchasing department, to provide you the training to that software that I mentioned. So sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get other departments to stay past, 5:30 or 6. That would be one first consideration. After that is what I'm looking at. So the first part of the timeline is, you see, after that initial meeting, I would be giving you either 2 weeks for you to evaluate the first part of the application. So let's say hotel motel is usually the smaller round of applications. Like Edgar, how many applicants did we receive this year? Or how many contracts do we have for hotel motel?
Currently, we have about 12 contracts, active contracts.
So hotel motel, you'll usually see about 12 applications. If you feel 2 weeks is enough, or we can do, if you scroll down, Edgar, from that timeline, you see a 1 week, I'm giving you 1 week to evaluate it. That's one consideration. And then from there, the general fund one is the one that we get a few more applications. How many applications did we get there? Do we usually get there, Edgar?
Normally about 30 to 35. active currently due to council and COVID. They did wind down the number in that.
So then, again, 2 weeks, and it can be a combination. If you want 2 weeks for one week for the other, or vice versa, let me know what you all think. That is just what I wanted to present to you all here to consider. Do you want me to give you another option? You all can discuss it and talk as a group. Usually the meetings for the reviews will be at 5:30 unless it's voted differently from the committee. There's different committees that meet at different times, so you all can vote on that too. Chairman, I guess we can go off to item number 8, discussion with possible action of process of application. If you all would just maybe first, motion if you're in agreement with any of the deadlines that I placed, and then second, we can discuss these meeting dates or any questions you have for staff at this point.
I'll open it to the floor. If there's any discussion on any preference to either of these timelines.
Yes, I'm not available Wednesdays in the evenings, Mondays and Wednesdays. Until after the semester finishes.
Ms. Hinojosa, are you available during the lunch hour?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I really like the timeline where it gives us 2 weeks. So I would make a motion to accept the recommendation for the 2-week timeline that was first presented, and also to see if we can have the meetings at noon on Wednesdays.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the first option, the 2-week option. If there's no discussion, go ahead and move to voting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. If there's no opposed, I believe the ayes have it.
I do have a question, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Beckelheimer.
I'm not clear on what I'm reading if the applications include historical perspective for each of the candidates, or applicants, I should say. In other words, if an entity tries to hit us up for third-party funding, will we know they have received it 10 years in a row and how much they received each of those years? Is that information that we'd be able to get readily when we see these applications?
Yes, because that is one of the requirements. I'm sorry. Did you want to answer that?
No, I was gonna lean on our staff liaison for that option. I think it's a reasonable request, and I think staff can provide that information.
Yeah, and actually one of their scoring criteria will be a historical narrative. So they are asked to give us some sort of historical narrative that can include anything to how long this committee has, or this nonprofit has been in existence here in Laredo. Can be anything from how many years they've been receiving third-party funding and they feel that they should continue. And of course, we'll have a lot of that information also. We always like to present the committee with, we always go with the past. We'll let you know what is currently funded this year, and then what's proposed, and then you all make your final recommendation. But we can definitely even go even further on a case by case, or if you want to see that in your first meeting, we can provide you a little report on 5 years of current funding of the current applicants. Yeah, I mean, we can definitely do that. If you want to put it in a form of a motion, and that way we'll have it for your first meeting, we can have whatever. If you're just looking at funding sources, we can definitely put that together.
Well, I would, but let me just clarify. So it's not just the funding they received from the city, but even their entire budget. In other words, where are the other monies they have received coming from, whether they be fundraisers or donations? In other words, I'm not a huge fan of doing something just because we've always done it that way. So everybody, I think, needs to earn their next day. So the more information you give us, the more intelligent assessment we can make for them, right? And so I don't know if that needs to be formed as a motion to make sure that additional information, and maybe I'm not even thinking it all the way through. And if anybody has an idea of what other additional information they would like to see to help make evaluations.
I could, let me see if, Edgar, do you have a copy of the most recent checklist, the application? And I can share that with the group right now. There is an actual checklist that has an extensive list of exhibits, and one of them does go to the budget. And we do ask them to give us their full budget, or basically where do we fall in their budget, right? So, and then we also ask for tax returns. So the committee is able to look at that whole application, and one of the items that is requested is a tax return. And the tax returns, you can see how much they're getting from other entities and how much they're getting as donations.
Sure.
So, and I know that has been discussed. So that will all be, a part of your discussion as a group. I've been part of this committee as a staff liaison for a couple of years, and I know that is something that the committee always looks at, because especially what it looks like this year and what it looked like last year is reductions in our funding amounts. So when I present to you that first amount that is going to be given to me by our budget department, I am foreseeing that it's not going to be as other years, right? So from there, we will have to evaluate how much money are they receiving from other entities, and if they would receive a reduction from their application, a reduction from what they've been receiving in the previous years, would they still be able to provide the service? So that is something that, yes, the committee will definitely have to consider and talk. But here, I just want to show you just to give you some ideas just go to, is there a checklist at the end? Well, and then that's an example of the budget. I mean, we ask for everything, even rosters and then we'll ask total expenditures, and I think at the end there's a checklist, Edgar. Yeah. So the checklist includes, sorry?
I was just going to ask you, would you happen to know off the top of your head, what's the smallest amount somebody has been funded, say, in the last 3 years, and the highest amount somebody has been funded in that same time frame?
So I think off the top of my head right now, Edgar, and interrupted me if I'm incorrect, but I think the smallest amount, like $5,000, is the smallest that the committee has given someone, and the most amount has been $100,000.
Okay.
So yeah, it just depends. It just really ranges. But this is the checklist that the agencies will have to submit to us. The board of directors rosters, because this is where we cross-check, right, that and nobody has a conflict of interest. There is, and even, I mean, in general, right, any conflict of interest, even with the city council. There'll be staff roster, because we want to make sure that there's capacity, right, to do what they're saying that they're going to do for our community. They'll have to show insurance liability, proof of that. They'll have to show us their policies and procedures, because we want to make sure that although we're giving them money to possibly be buying something, that they are following the same procurement that, any city funding would still be required to by state law. Articles of incorporation, their bylaws, and then these are regular, like proof of the IRS 501c3 activeness, audits, reviews, because we want to know what kind of financial stability they have. Annual report is where we basically ask them to give us a report of what they've done, in the past with our funding or with other sources of funding. And then approved minutes of their board, giving whoever is submitting the application the authority to submit an application. And then, of course, their IRS form and and then that they attended our virtual training.
Would any of these include salaries within the institution itself?
If we're not funding the salaries, that might not be part of our application. Edgar, am I correct? Unless they're requesting us to fund a position, depending on what it is that that person will be carrying out, that might be included. But I don't believe overall salaries will be considered.
Correct. We don't ask for documentation of salaries unless they are requesting to get funded for salaries.
Sometimes their annual audits and reviews, that might have some of that information.
Yeah, I would say even if they don't include the person's name, it's important because I didn't, in my introduction, I didn't tell you my life has been finance. That's what my degree's been in. That's what I've worked on. And it would be easy to say, okay, we have this other source of income. Let's use it. I'm making this up, right? I'm not accusing anybody of anything. If I use my other sources of income to pay these crazy salaries, but I'm going to ask the city of Laredo so I can use money to pay for other things because we're using all this other money in salaries. So I think knowing salaries is very important before you determine whether you're going to give them any money or not, even if the money isn't specifically earmarked for a salary. Does that make any sense?
Oh, yes, I do see where, I mean, we can definitely ask our legal department
Ms. Martinez.
if that is something that would be allowed to be requested. Yes?
I do believe that we have all that information provided to us with their submission of application in terms of their budget.
Scroll up to the budget, Edgar. I think, I know there's a section that asks for, well, here we ask for the different sources of funding, but I don't think, if they're not asking to fund the salaries, we might not be asking for that information. Edgar, I don't know. I mean, you see all these applications more often than me. Do you recall? I don't believe we do.
Is there something that prevents us from putting it in there?
There's a section, there's a budget that they have to submit, and in that budget they do put down what different monies they have earmarked going to what things. They don't put down individual salaries that they paid. They just put down salary as an expense.
Okay, so we would have a total for salaries, and then of course we would know how many employees they have.
Yes, you would have a roster. Correct.
All right, that's probably
Yes.
close enough, I guess. All right. Did anything that I just request information on require me to make a motion to get it to be the case?
Well, if you want us to change anything on the application, sorry.
Yeah, I don't. So before we do that, there's things that we need to consider. A few of the organizations that we do support, like Misericordia and other places, may not want to give their rosters out of their salaries just because of the people and the nature of the things that they do. So unless we have something that we really are trying to hang our hat on, then I understand getting the salaries as a combined and the number of the employees would be fine, but I think in names and salaries, I don't think that should be part of the public record. Because whatever we get is part of public record and can be requested.
I'm fine with that.
Ms. Martinez, I believe that Mr. Beckenheimer was asking for the funding report for the to be included, and that would be something that I don't know if you would require there to be formal action in terms of getting like the previous 5 years of funding history.
Yes, that would be best if you can provide that in a form of a motion, and I could definitely include it in our next meeting when we would start talking about the applications.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to that effect.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Yes, I second it.
Seconded by Mr. Beckelheimer. Is there any discussion on the matter? If there's no further discussion, I'll go ahead and move into voting? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. All right, the ayes have it. We can move on to the next agenda item. Ms.
Sorry,
Martinez?
would we have to make a separate motion to include in the application, even though it's combined, the salaries and the number of personnel? Does that have to be made into a motion so it can be included in the application?
You can motion it.
I'd like to make that motion then, that we include that stat, that we request the information as far as the amount of their annual budgets that go to salaries and how many people it covers, not necessarily individualized.
Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Ms. Hinojosa. Is there any discussion? If there's no further discussion, we'll go ahead and move to voting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. I believe the ayes have it. Ms. Martinez?
Okay. So I think the last item that was on the agenda was discussion with possible action to approve the meeting dates, which we kind of added to the possible action on process of applications. We kind of motioned there.
I think we've already had action on
Correct.
that. We were gonna go with the 2 week time frame. If there's no other business, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. If that's
Could I ask one more question?
yes,
Sorry.
of course, Mr. Go ahead.
The amount of information we're going to be going through, and I like to be very thorough, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes if that's not how you all normally do it. And what I would ask is that time frame sufficient to do that? How often will this committee be able to meet to discuss these things? I don't know historically, how many times do you all meet during this period of time that we're referring to when the applications come into when we give our recommendation to City Council?
Ms. Martinez?
Okay. Yeah, let me give you a little brief, just some information or some food for thought. Basically, what I presented you right now was an estimated timeline of giving you 2 weeks to evaluate it. So basically, what 2 weeks of evaluation means is that, let's say for the first batch is going to be hotel motel. And we mentioned that we get about 12 to 15 applications with all the attachments you saw. It's going to be electronically. We'll give you the access. Like on the April 28th, we'll give you all the information on how to access it, how to look at the applications. There won't be any discussions on the applications other than me talking about previous awards, amounts, but you're really not going to be discussing applications on that date because you will not have had a chance to see the applications yet, right? So we'll show you how to enter them. How to go in there, how to access them, how to evaluate them. We'll talk about previous funding. I'll have that report that you motioned to. You can see how many, years they've been receiving funding. And then we'll give you the budget that we'll have to work within, right? And all that. And then what it looks like, so the 2 weeks, the way it's normally worked is that, so you'll have 2 weeks to do the homework on your own, right? To look at all these applications, to evaluate them, all in 1 day, in 2-3 days, whatever is your preference and your ability to do it. Then the expectation is then that May meeting, that first May meeting that we decided would be on a Wednesday, we would meet to discuss. You would have an hour to discuss. So and I would ask that, I think the way we did it that worked best last time was that before that date, even at least the day before, if you give us 24 hours before that you've submitted to the system, I could tally up all the grading, right? So the system you'll be able to put their grade. Remember how I said that applications should only be considered if they get a 7 or better, because each little criteria will have a 20 points, 15 points, so forth. So if you evaluate them prior to our first meeting, I will be able to present to you on that May 12th meeting. I will present to you that tally. So you'll see how, and I believe last year we did it, it'll be Thayes, hotel, motel, application 1, 2, 3. These are the scores. This is his average for each. Well, the average, let's say, for application number 1. And then Ms. Hinojosa, application number 1, this is your total. Mr. Beckenheimer, this is your. So then you'll see, we'll tally them all up and you'll see, well, this agency number 1 got an 80, right? So you'll see all that. And then that's when you can open it up to discuss, to vote all. And that's when you all will basically increase funding, decrease funding. Now, let me give you an example. A lot of agencies ask for a lot more money than they've really been getting. And that's when it's going to get tough. You know, it is going to get tough. A lot of them ask for $100,000. And the reality is we don't have funding to give 12 agencies $100,000. You'll have new applicants. You'll have some applicants that didn't meet the deadline or didn't decide to meet the deadline. So the new applicants, you'll have to determine, are you going to take away from someone else to give the new applicant, things like that. But you'll have about an hour. Now, it's happened in the past, and you have 2 weeks right now, right? You're giving yourself a timeline. You can always motion to change that timeline if something happens that, you know, that first meeting, we didn't get to meet, to finish our whole, and that's what happened last year. We would set a date and we didn't finish, you know. So then we would say, okay, I need 72-hour notice to put in another meeting as per the state requirements of an Open Meetings Act. So you could possibly say, you know what, let's squeeze in another meeting somewhere between our next evaluation period of general fund, and let's try to finish this off. Or we just revisit the whole timeline and move everything down. My goal is to have, as I mentioned, most of the final presentation and committee recommendations by June, because then I need to start meeting the budget timelines for the city. Budget last year was around, Edgar, correct me if I'm wrong, July? August. So we have some wiggle room, so we can move meetings. Now, it takes a lot of commitment. You saw it today. I mean, it does take a lot of commitment to say you're going to show up to meeting. And we had, unfortunately, sometimes that we don't meet quorum, we cannot discuss anything. So it does take a lot of commitment from the committee, you know, to join us. You are a committee of 9, but right now there is 1 vacancy, so we have 8. So we still need, even at 8 full members, I still need 5 of you to meet quorum. So that gets difficult. So will there be, hopefully there's not any times that we need to reschedule a meeting, but that might also happen. I hope I answered your question. I might have answered a little bit more.
No, you did. Thank you so much.
I've got a question. Actually, several questions, if it's okay with you all.
Go right ahead.
Okay, you mentioned earlier that some of the applications are turned in incomplete. I don't think we should accept them if they're incomplete. I know when Laredo area gives out grants, if the application is incomplete, it's just incomplete. We just don't take it into consideration.
And that will be brought up to the committee, and you all will vote on that. Definitely. I mean, we make it very strict on our application that we say no incomplete applications, but as a committee and as staff liaison, I present to you all the information that I have. I'll even tell you who submitted a late application. I'll let you know what is it that they're missing, and I'll let you know who's complete. I give you the information of all the applications. You all will vote also on that first meeting when we're going to give you the training on how to evaluate them. You will also be voting on, will I be accepting all the applications? Okay.
Wouldn't it be feasible to go ahead and do that now? Because if you go ahead and mention the names and all that, then there's going to be prejudice, or there could be prejudice. I think it would be best if we just go, if they're not complete, they just, you know, are not able to get funding this year.
And that is something you all could, in the discussion with possible action on the process of our application, under that item, you can definitely motion any, changes that you want. And if you want to motion, I mean, you can entertain any type of motion. So if you want to put that in the form of a motion, we can definitely not bring you any applications or anything.
So are we throwing out applications that are incomplete, or you're just not bringing us applications that are incomplete?
That is what I guess that is up to the committee if you all want to put it in form of a motion. Either way, let me just give you an example of what's happened in the past. In the past, there had been one year there was confusion on what form needed to be signed. So technically, it was missing one signature. Technically, that's an incomplete application. Some grants, I work with different grants. So some federal grants are very strict that even you not clicking on something, leaving a blank, can be grounds for incompleteness. That is why I mentioned that I bring to the board, to the committee, what type of incompleteness we are letting you know so that you all can decide if that's really an incomplete application or not. One year we had there was a miscommunication on, I believe, or the way the application, because it had been a new system that we had used for electronic submissions, and they weren't able to submit their tax returns because it was so big. I mean, just give you an example. So technically, that was incomplete. So there's just different. And just to give you some historical also background is, there's been years that the committee will vote don't consider incomplete applications. We take it to council, all your recommendations, and council will task the committee to reconvene and evaluate an incomplete application. I mean, historically, those are just different options. But
okay, I've been there when we've been asked to reconsider an application, so I know that can happen. So why don't we do this? Why don't we give applications that are complete preference, and then we review those, and any incomplete applications we get to know who's the incomplete application and what's incomplete in it, and then we can make that decision as a committee rather than throwing them all out and then winding up having to go back in and pull them all back out again.
Yeah, that is something definitely that you all can consider or discuss or entertain any type of motion.
Was that a motion, Dr. Gaskins?
Yeah, so I motion that we we review all completed applications first, and they will get preference, and we will review incomplete applications at the discretion of the committee.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded by Mr. Reyes. Is there any discussion on that motion? Ms. Hinojosa, did that answer your request completely, or did you want to add anything to that, Ms. Hinojosa?
I think in order to be safe, we need to consider the fact that if we are going to take into consideration one incomplete application, then we have to take into consideration all incomplete applications, because otherwise we're being prejudiced.
I think if I recall the way he worded it, I think all the incomplete applications would be provided to us as a board, and we could then go through those applications on a case-by-case basis. I don't know if that's how you intended your motion,
Yeah.
Dr. Gaskins?
Yeah, so that's what I meant by, so all the applications that are complete, we would review first, and those will be given preference. Any incomplete applications, they will come to the board or come to the committee, and we would have the discretion whether to review them or not based on what's incomplete about them and any other thing. So if they're incomplete because they forgot a signature as opposed to they didn't give us their tax returns, those are two different things. So I'll say, that's why I say leave it at the discretion of the committee, because we can have a discussion about that and figure out, do we want to accept it or not? But that leaves the choice in our hands and doesn't really tie our hands for a future saying if we're going to or not.
Is there any other discussion?
I'd like to hear what John Beckelheimer thinks.
Mr. Beckelhammer, you have the floor. You're on mute. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I was trying to, this is the first time I used this WebEx thing. I've done all my meetings on Zoom. It's a little bit different. I'm understanding that the staff brings us all the applications and we determine whether we want to hear it or not, or give it a grade of 0 or not. So I think we already have this power. If we ask them to give them to us only as the completed ones, then we're asking them to make sure they're complete. And you and I may decide, well, a signature missing is still complete, a tax return missing is not complete. I think we already have more authority that way than waiting. In other words, if we give some a perfect application, if we consider them first, does that mean we fund them? Again, we're not determining the funding, I know, but does that mean we make a recommendation for the funding for them? Then by the time we get to the ones that are incomplete, there's no more money. When you and I and 3 of us or 5 of us might decide that, hey, that one entity that forgot to get a signature because the person was sick with COVID, we can't listen to them until after the money's already gone. And it may be one that we all love and think is the best for the city. So I'm a little apprehensive of putting in the category of put them at the end when we already have the decision to say, put that one back. We'll come back to that one later on a case-by-case basis. We can work. How does Ms. Martinez, how does the staff present to us those applications anyway? What's the order we receive them in? In the order they turned into you or alphabetical? How are they given to us anyway?
I believe, Nadia, do you recall if the system automatically puts them by time of turning in, or was it alphabetical? And I can ask that and get you that information.
We have the information as to when they're submitted. So if the committee would like to see them on a first come, first served basis, we do have the time and date when they get submitted. Or we can have them alphabetical order, however y'all like. But the system does have that capability of showing when and at what time.
And just to add, Mr. Beckenheimer, what you mentioned was correct. That's what I was trying to, I guess, describe the process is we just check everything. We're going to go down the checklist, make sure that the application submitted everything, and then we present it to the board with any discrepancies. Maybe the word, maybe I shouldn't have said was incompleteness. Maybe if there's something missing or a discrepancy, where, the way that it was worded might have been misinterpreted. One year we understood it as most current. We had 2018 tax return. Well, let's just say, 2018 tax return, not everyone has the same cycle. We hadn't realized that. So I thought that was a miss that we missed, staff putting together the application. So I brought it to the board and I said, they did give me their most recent tax return. So now we changed it. We said most recent tax return of the entity versus an actual year, because we had missed that, So we'll bring you all the information. We'll let you know, hey, out of this checklist, everything's here. Now, some people, you might decide that the narrative on someone was incomplete because they didn't really answer the question, and someone else answered it, perfectly. So that might also be something that you evaluate and you consider incomplete or complete. So that is why you're correct. The committee does have the scoring criteria, and that's your power to say how you feel this application is complete or incomplete, or narrates their need. That is kind of hard for us to determine because we're only tasked with facilitating the application process.
Yeah, with all respect to Dr. Gaskins, I understand what he's coming from. I completely agree with him, except that I believe that maybe the way we listen to them is we get them all, we rank them, and then we listen to them or debate them in order of our rankings, our cumulative rankings, as opposed to, and you might say, well, you're missing a signature, I'm giving you a 0 on your ranking. That's automatically going to drop that person down several notches. But I'd rather have the authority within the committee, which is why we're formed and why we're tasked by our city councilmen and women to do so, as opposed to asking staff to make that determination before they give it to us. that's taking a little authority out of our pocket, and I'd rather hang on to it, at least this first go around for me. So with all due respect, they're not have that, but I understand what the reason for it is. I just think it's a little misguided from that one perspective, if I may.
Thank you, Mr. Beckelheimer.
Then I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay.
I also have another question, sorry.
Yes, Ms. Hinojosa, go
When we
ahead.
give out, yes, when we give out grants, we check them out against the IRS website to see if they're eligible to receive. I think that's for donations, though. Do we check that for these?
Gina?
So our legal department does assist us in making sure that these are bona fide nonprofits, section, what is it? C3s. Yeah, C3s. And I believe there is something in our checklist that does ask for them to give us their current certification from the state, like the way that they're registered in the state. So we can always verify that. And I know our legal department gets a list of all our nonprofits, and they assist us also in checking some of these items. And of course, you know, even before and then there's another check once we start signing contracts. All our contracts will go through the whole insurance process and legal process to ensure that we are signing a contract with, I guess, what's the word? Authorized entity.
Did that answer your question, Ms. Hinojosa?
Yes.
Perfect. Was there any more discussion in regards to any actions that we might have before the board? If there isn't, I'd just like to add before we adjourn that we all be aware that we are under the confinements of the Open Meetings Act. So now that we are all on this committee, we have to be aware when we're in social gatherings or even when we're applying to emails that are provided to staff, that if there are more than 5 of us CC'd on that email, that our opinions cannot be given in that email, because that would be a violation of the Open Meetings Act. So I would utilize a reply only, or just be aware of that in general. If we're all in a social setting together, that we can be, but we just can't discuss business as far as that comes forward to this board. So I know Ms. De Leon is our compliance officer. If she wants to add anything to that notion.
Yes, and we instructed, you know, something similar, that whenever we sent out emails to the board members, for example, in this case, to send email reminders or email information, that we use the BCC line on our email. That way nobody sees who's getting copied on the email or the emails being sent to. So we have also been instructed to do that, and that's the way when we've been dealing with that business.
But I would also like to add, to remind everyone that as soon as the application process opens, if an agency does want to talk to you about their application, that you best just turn them over to our department and tell them that if they have any questions, we'll have a process. Even us ourselves, we will not, there will be a way that they can submit questions, and we will answer questions to all. So it's just in the fairness, you know, not to show preference to anybody. One thing I didn't mention, part of the process that we follow, we will put the newspaper ad of applications, and we do send that newspaper ad to all our current nonprofits that are receiving funding. Anybody that we have on our mailing list, also, we let them know that this is coming. But as regards, and I believe you all can advise, you know, it's just that you all can't give any recommendations or any assistance in the application, unless you're going to recuse yourself from voting on that one particular agency.
So if there's no other discussion, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
It's been moved and seconded by Ms. Hinojosa. I believe I saw her hand go up. But there's all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, signify by saying nay. Meeting adjourned. 6:45.
Thank you. Have a good day.